and we're going to start. I would like to welcome all of you to the 27th in a series of Zoom lectures sponsored by Congregation KINS. As I'm sure you know by now, all topics are STEM related, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and we've of course added medicine and psychology to the mix. Our speaker today is Rabbi Levi Mostofsky, and his topic is the nature of miracles. Rabbi Mostofsky is currently the executive director of the Chicago Rabbinical Council. He attended Yeshiva University, earned a BS degree in biology, and received smicha from REITs at YU. Before coming to Chicago about 6.5 years ago, Rabbi Mostofsky served as the director of continuing rabbinic education at YU. Originally from Boston, he now lives in West Rogers Park, and I'm proud to announce that I have the opportunity to daven mincha and marav with him every single day at KINS. He and his wife Yifat are blessed with 2 girls and a baby boy. As always, you're going to have 2 opportunities to ask questions. You may unmute yourself at any point in time and ask the speaker a question, and also after the end of his presentation, you will have another opportunity. So I'm going to turn the program over to Rabbi Mostofsky.
Thank you so much, Dr. Karish. Thank you for the introduction and for organizing this fantastic series with such dedication and passion, and for the opportunity to speak today. I want to dedicate, I guess, the talk today to my father, Alav Shalom, who passed away just about 4 months ago. My father was a brilliant Ben Torah. He was a musmach of REITs. He studied with Reb Soloveitchik, and he was a committed Yirei Shamayim. He was also a celebrated researcher and professor of behavioral medicine at BU at Boston University for over 60 years. He was really an engaging person who loved people. He was naturally curious, and he just had wide disciplinary interests. So in 2012, after my father had been choosing with different people in different parts of the university, somebody in the Department of Religion got him connected to the Archdiocese in Malta. And he gave the annual Benjamin Tona lecture for the Discern Institute for Research on the Sign of the Times, which is affiliated with the Archdiocese in Malta. And the title of his talk was Medical Miracles, Faith, Fact, or Fiction. He was talking to a very different audience than we have today. And I'm just touching on some of the things that he mentioned, but really pretty different in terms of what we're talking about today. So that was part of the inspiration for this topic. The other one is a very critically timely connection to where we are now in the Jewish calendar, Mein Yonah D'Yoma. So as we know, the basis, I guess, for these lectures is the fact that we exist in this natural world, and the relationship between nature and the miraculous is something which has been explored throughout history. It's an expansive topic. It's consumed thinkers throughout history, and throughout history, different what has been called different disciplines have explored the matter. It's been relegated to religion, theology, medicine, philosophy of medicine, history of medicine, psychology, medical sociology, even magic. And as you go through this topic, trying to do research on this massive topic is very difficult, and the terminology and the disciplinary rules kind of change throughout history and from whatever angle you take it. Needless to say, in the short amount of time that we have today, we're going to focus on a very, very narrow slice of the conversation, which is the approach of the Ramban to supernatural phenomena. I really want to thank my friend, Rabbi Nathanael Wiederblank. Rabbi Wiederblank is a Maggid Shir at Yeshiva University. He teaches in the college. He teaches smicha students. But he is also publishing a 3-part series of volumes called Illuminating Jewish Thought as part of the REITs Press Hashkafa series. I highly recommend it. He is incredibly thorough. and really just a wonderful thinker and organizer. And I really want to thank him for what he's given in terms of help to me in preparing this. So we know that Jewish tradition gives great respect for, let me just stop this for a second. Jewish tradition gives great respect to nature. Nature which was divinely created, divinely ordered, and it's the world in which we live. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created this world with his unique divine knowledge. So when we study it, we have a better understanding of him. This is the world that he placed us in. It's the world that we're charged to live in. And this is the world in which we are expected to do our holy work. We're expected to admire the world, to respect it. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us his Torah to live in this world. We can't fully appreciate what we need to be doing. We can't fully appreciate the Torah without fully appreciating the world, the context in which we exist. And this natural world, as we know, is governed by natural law. But we also believe, as religious Jews, in the divine creator who is omnipotent and omniscient and able to transcend the laws of nature. And we know that there are countless descriptions in Tanakh and in Chazal of events and assurances of transcending nature. We say 3 times every day, right? In Modim, Al Nisecha Shebechol Yamimanu, the miracles that are always with us, Dal Niflosecha, the wonders, V'tovasecha, the good things that you do, Shebechol Eis, Erev Aboker V'tzarayim. It's omnipresent there, the goodness that you bestow, and seemingly that you bestow above and beyond what nature would deem, what random nature would offer. And it's kind of interesting. The Torah itself, begins with creation, but the end of the Torah talks about the wondrous miracles that we saw in Mitzrayim, and that Moshe Rabbeinu then helped convey to the Jewish people and to us. So the Torah itself may begin with creation, but at the end, the final message is one of miracles. Just as an aside, it's interesting that the word miracle, the English word miracle, is from the Latin miraculum, which is an object of wonder, similar, akin to the word mirror, to wonder, to gaze. And throughout history, miracles were seen as kind of wondrous, unpredictable, and unexplainable phenomena that defied whatever contemporary scientific understanding of natural law they had at the time. And naturally, it was attributed to the supernatural. And as history developed, a lot of our understanding broadened. We have more data, we have more understanding. And those same phenomena, which may have been considered miraculous then, or supernatural, we now understand how they are in fact natural. But again, we believe that there are events that are truly unnatural. There are events which are truly demonstrations of Yad Hashem. And these aren't things which leave us questioning, they actually confirm our deepest beliefs. 2 quick psukim in terms of the word nes. When we say nes, a miracle, the pasuk in Tehillim, nasata lireecha nes lihisnoses, right? A nes in biblical Hebrew is a flag. It's something which demonstrates. A miracle in this world demonstrates God's involvement and God's engagement in the world. And of course, the first time we see this is in, I don't know if it's the first time, but the classic citation is when Bnei Yisrael are commanded to make the nachash, hold the nachash up, the serpent, put it on a staff, hold it up. So this idea of a miracle for us isn't things which we say, wow, what could it be? But it rather are things that we know and just confirms what we know to be true. And of course, the most fundamental nace, the most basic nace, which demonstrates Hashem's involvement is Yetzias Mitzrayim. It's the plagues that we saw in Mitzrayim. It's the Kriyas Yamsuf. And in fact, the pasuk itself says, "L'man teda ki ani Hashem b'kerev haaretz," that the purpose of what happened in Mitzrayim, of Yetzias Mitzrayim, was for us to see God's active engagement and involvement. And he shows us that he's actively engaged. There's a pasuk in Yirmiyahu, right? Gadol ha'yitzav v'rov ha'aliyah asher einecha kuchos al kol darchei bnei adam. We say, you God, you see all that's going on. You're cognizant of all the ways of mankind. And you grant each man according to his ways. So we see two fundamental beliefs that we hold to be true. One is that Hashem knows, he's omniscient, right? And he's able to act and intercede, and he's omnipotent. So these are two very, very basic fundamental beliefs that we have. And following that, we believe, of course, in Schar V'Onesh, that Hashem interjects himself into nature for reward and for punishment. And in fact, the Gemara says that no man bruises his finger here on earth unless it was so decreed. It's a famous Gemara, that everything that happens in this world is by divine decree. So where does this leave us in terms of nature? So before we get to that, again, I want to focus on the Ramban. And I'm going to get to the Ramban, which has been perplexing, kind of as the jumping off point for exploring what the Ramban believes about nature versus the miraculous. The Ramban very quickly was born. He was born in Girona in Catalonia in 1194. Of course, then he went to Israel and died there. Actually, according to his Talmud, the Rashba, he was a physician, which is interesting. I guess a scientist of his day. He spent much of his energies and he dedicated much of his life engaging in the conversation about the Rambam and the Moreh Nevuchim that have been published. The Rambam, of course, was very much a rationalist, and different people took what the Rambam wrote and took it in different ways. And the Ramban saw it as his duty to not to necessarily criticize the Rambam, but to really demonstrate that with all that the Rambam had published, there's certain fundamental beliefs that we have in Hashem that we can never forget. So the Ramban certainly believed in divine providence, right? And in his Hakdam, in his introduction to the book of Iyov, right, he says clearly that someone who denies providence and says that God does not intervene when people do right or wrong, such a person has no portion in the world to come, right? Ein chelek le'olam haba, and he has no part he has no connection to Jewish belief. It's pretty harsh. So certainly he believes in divine providence, which then brings us to the comment of the Ramban, which has caused a lot of confusion and controversy in terms of what the Ramban believed. And it's a citation which was then turned into a hit song in Israel a few years ago. The Ramban in Parsha, the end of Parshas Bo, it's talking about the mitzvah of tefillin. And the Ramban says, right? Why do we have the mitzvah of tefillin? So that we should always have the remembrance of leaving Mitzrayim in our hearts and in our minds. And he says, I'm going to tell you, this is actually a very basic, this is actually very fundamental to many of the mitzvahs. It says, Hashem doesn't always do miracles every time he wants to send a message. He doesn't send us text messages and WhatsApps on a whim, right? But what he does is, right, he does something like Yitzias Mitzrayim, so that in every generation we will have something to refer back to. So just a few other things. This is a lengthy Ramban. I didn't cite the whole thing. But before we get to the next part, which is the famous part, he mentions the fact that there were many groups throughout history who had heretical beliefs. Many denied providence and really denied that Hashem had any involvement in the world. And we see that Hashem does interact with the world. And we see that, again, we saw in Mitzrayim that Hashem interacted with the world. And now we get to the famous part of it. And from the great and public miracles are the moda b'nisim hanistarim shehim yisara Torah kula. From the fact that there are demonstrable big miracles, we understand that there are many innumerable small miracles. She'en l'adam chelik, right? She'en l'adam chelik b'Torahs Moshe Rabbeinu ad shenamin b'chol dvareinu mikreinu shekulam nisim. Ein lohem teva u'minhago shel olam. That anybody who does not believe that every aspect, all our things and occurrences are all miracles and have no nature or the way of the world in them, right? That person has no chelik in Torahs Moshe. He is an absolute heretic. Anybody who believes in nature is an absolute heretic. Pretty strong. Ben Rav and Ben Biyachid, right? And this is a very, very strong statement of the Ramban. And the Ramban talks about nature and miracles and the supernatural and God's intervention in this world. He speaks about it in many, many places. And this is certainly what he says here in Parshas Bo is something which is certainly echoed in other places. One of his famous drushas that the Ramban has, which we have, is the drushas Toras Hashem Tumah. And again, he says, very similar, that line of Ein Bahem Teva Minhago Shel Olam, in that last line, right? That everything that happens in this world is not due to natural law, but really to the supernatural. And this reflects a view of all-encompassing hashgacha. That Hashem's impact on the world is active and complete, and really there is no such thing as natural law. So now where does this leave us? We can wrap up the STEM lecture series kind of right now, because there's no such thing as STEM. It's every step of the way is just divine intervention, and there is no natural law. But of course, there has to be more nuance. We know that there are laws. First of all, very practically, I can't sit down in a chair unless I know that gravity is going to keep it up, unless I know that physics are going to work. I can't take a bite out of an apple unless I make certain assumptions about the way metabolism works and the human body works. So obviously there's more to it than just saying that every single step is unpredictable due to what Hashem decides at that moment. But even the Ramban, throughout his commentary, he makes differences and he presents differences between Jews and non-Jews, what happens in Israel and outside of Israel, what happens to tzaddikim, what he mentioned before about a yachid, an individual versus many people. So you see that there are differences. So if there are differences, there must be some aspect of nature which is running things even at some point, and some patterns which are being followed and laws which are being followed. But aside from that, we have again, there are many citations of the Ramban throughout his writings, and we have other places the Ramban demonstrates a much more limited view of intervention in the world. So there's a pasuk in Bereshis, which is cryptic, when Hashem is praising Abraham. He says, I'm going to bless him because I know that he is going to lead his family in a certain way. And the Ramban translate this, that basically, the Gambin and the Munach, right? That last line he says, Leo Shmiraso Daf Gabo Tamit, Lot Tiparid Hayediya Vazafir Vimenu Klal. basically that Hashem promises, when Hashem promises that he will look after Abraham, what the Ramban is saying is that he knows Abraham due to his righteousness, and Abraham gets a special level of divine intervention and supervision because he's a tzaddik. So we have the pasuk of Ein Hashem El Yorev, that Hashem has a special relationship to the tzaddikim. That because he's a tzaddik, and only because he's a tzaddik, does he have this interaction. So now the hashgacha isn't, as we might have assumed from the quote from Parshas Bo. Now we see something which is much more specific to tzaddikim. And in the commentary on Eov, this is pretty lengthy, but I tried to underline and bold some of the more relevant parts. So again, the Ramban demonstrates that somebody who is closer to Hashem and cleaves to Hashem, just reading from the English at the bottom, does not separate himself, the connection to God in his thoughts. So that person is going to be more protected. And the other person, right, is going to fall more to the whims of nature. So now, mankind's providence is a function of his recognition of Hashem. The more connected you are to Hashem, the more connected you are, the more protection you're going to have, the more supernatural protection. So, in a sense, the more connected you are to Hashem, to the divine, the more you transcend materialism, the more you transcend the physical world, and the more you are above what natural law controls. And that seems to be more what the Ramban is saying. So, again, we seem to see a contradiction in what the Ramban writes. In the Ramban, in Parshas Bo, and in the drasha that we saw, miracles are the full mode of operation, and here we seem to say that they're exceptional, and generally nature is operational. So, what are we supposed to take from this? So, Rabbi Wiederblank, you shared two different ways of trying to understand this. One is that really, according to the Ramban, the natural state of the human experience is being connected to God. That is the base relationship that we should all be aspiring to, that we should all expect. And as such, if we're completely connected to God, and that should be the expectation, the goal, the model, so then we in fact do transcend nature. And to the extent that we do so, we're above Teva, we're above nature. When somebody loses part of that connection, it's almost as a punishment that we are left to the whims of nature. And being abandoned to nature is some form of punishment. It could be that practically most people are not at that level of transcending their materialism, their material being. So in terms of how prevalent it is, yes, most of the time, nature may be what rules and guides the world around us. But really, in an ideal sense, Teva should not be playing a role in how we, as aspiring tzaddikim, are governed. And again, and the second thing that Rabbi Wiederblank pointed out is perhaps the Ramban is not denying Teva, but he's denying that the overt interventions are what are limited. Meaning there are lots of ways in which either built into nature there are protections, or there are what the Ramban calls a nes nista, a hidden miracle that is protecting us. We know from this recent pandemic, not everybody got sick. Not everybody who got sick got very sick. Not everybody who got very sick was taken from us. And what determined that? There are infinite factors and functions. Who knows why? Well, we have a sense of why things happen and why things don't happen. and everything falls within nature. Again, it could be that the Ramban is saying something more than that, and more than what the Rambam was saying. The Rambam, and we can get into the Rambam was taking more of that naturalistic approach, that everything is kind of couched in these things. And the Ramban might be saying even more than that. Hashem does things to actually move things around. But basically, what we see from the Ramban is that there certainly is natural law, and we certainly are governed by natural law. And remember, the Ramban, in many of his commentaries here, is not just describing things in objective terms. He's trying to communicate a response to the Rambam. He's trying to communicate to his environment, his community, and to the world around him. It's just gotten a sense from the Rambam of this hyper-rationalist approach. He wants to enforce the sense that even though, yes, there is a respect for nature, we appreciate the fact that natural law exists, and we are, coming into this era of into an era of greater understanding, greater appreciation. It goes hand in hand with belief. So, what does all this mean to us? So, two things to consider. One is a quote from Rabbi Lichtenstein, which is really on Rabbeinu Bechai. He's not talking about this per se, but what he says is that at the end of the day, what we see and what we have to appreciate is that not that we can predict or expect divine intervention, but the fact that there is divine intervention gives us comfort. The fact that everything is ordered, and the fact that everything is as part of a divine design should give us comfort. Not that it's predictive, and not that we necessarily know what the explanation is or understand what the divine will is, but we understand that everything that happens does happen for a reason. And the other one is the Gemara in Brochos, which Meir Twersky is fond of quoting, that if somebody sees that they're suffering, they should search their ways. As it says in the Pasuk in Eicha, Nach b'sad derachenu v'nach kor v'nashuv Hashem. We see from what Twersky is that what exactly is happening and how everything is operating. It's largely a philosophical matter. Practically, our role and our job is to consider what we can do and how we can do better. How it all plays out in terms of what Hashem does for us is not really the question. Again, we don't do things in order to get reward. We don't do things in order to get intervention. We have to do what we need to do. There's a well-known Tosfos that says that even the things that Hashem provides for, the Gemara says that there's no protection against sin and pachit. That's something which is still something we have to suffer from the cold and the winds. And the Tosfos says, yeah, that means you can't be negligent. We have to do what we need to do. We follow the natural law. We examine, we understand, and we operate based off of natural law. But we also appreciate the fact that there is a higher order guidance to the world. And it's something that we have to appreciate for our own interests so that we can develop. And we know that as the Ramban said, to the extent that we can rise above materialism and become more spiritual, we can be granted that protection in whatever form it might express itself. And again, this is interesting, just in terms of the word miracle versus the word nace. For us, it's not something the wonder is, it's not a magic trick that happens. It's really a demonstration of Hashem's omnipresence and his will. And that's what, as we approach Pesach, coming up in just over a week, the greatest lesson that the Ramban wants us to take away, especially for those of us who study and appreciate the intricate beauty of nature and the perfection of natural law, especially for us, what we need to appreciate is Hashem's presence and engagement, and his ability and his interest in guiding us, each and every one of us, and all of us together. And that's the message of Pesach, especially for us. Certainly, as I think of my father, this balance between his different passionate interests. He certainly pursued an academic study and research, but it was never at the cost of Amunah and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And I think for all of us, as we pursue greater knowledge of the world around us and nature and the sciences, this is something which we should do and we can do and we should do. We should never lose sight of the fact that the nisim that we saw in Mitzrayim and the nisim that we live every year on Pesach, they serve as everlasting demonstrations that we can never stray in our belief in the one who created everything and who controls everything, and that ultimately, yes, thank you.
Very interesting. Thank you so very much. Thank you for not just the excellent presentation, but for the sponsorship in memory of your father. And if anyone in the audience would like to pose a question to Rabbi Mostofsky, now is the time. Anyone?
Again, I highly encourage getting this series of books from Rabbi Peter Blank. He's published 2 out of the 3, but he's an incredible resource to the Jewish community.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
They're on sale on the Koran website. One question, where's the Ramban, Rabbi, that you quoted?
Which one? The famous one on Bo? It's at the very end of Parshas Bo. Let's see.
Okay. Any other questions?
Shmos Yud Gimel Tez Zayin.
Thank you. I'll grab it. Thank you so much.
Okay. If not, then I would like to announce that the next STEM meeting will be 1 week from today, March the 23rd at 12 noon. And I would like to thank our son Howard, who made the connection with Rabbi Moshe Tarragon from Yeshivat Har Etzion and Gush Etzion, who will be the speaker. And his title is actually 2 titles rolled into one: Tracing Paro's Recalcitrance, that's the first title, or Paro Didn't Listen to Moshe, Why Don't We Listen? Looking forward to hearing that, and that will be again noon next Tuesday. And as you probably know by now, anytime you want to know what's coming up for the following week, simply visit the KINS website and the announcement will be there. Also, the recording of today's lecture will be posted by Rabbi Bressler sometime this evening, would be my guess. And all of the STEM lectures from day 1 are posted on the KINS website. Thank you all for attending today and looking forward to seeing you all next week. Have a great week.